She'd imagined this moment differently during the 3 months she'd spent searching, pictured herself riding in with answers, with her sister Josephine beside her, vindicated and triumphant. Instead, she was alone, exhausted, and about to make a fool of herself in front of the entire town. Clara Whitmore, Sheriff Daniel Garrett's voice carried across the street with the weight of authority and something else. Was that warning? He stood on the jailhouse steps, tall and imposing in his dark vest and silver star, his jaw tight beneath a well-trimmed beard. Didn't expect to see you back in redemption. I'm looking for my sister. Clara's voice cracked, betraying the sleepless nights and dead-end trails. She dismounted, her legs unsteady after hours in the saddle, and nearly stumbled. Several townswomen tittered behind their hands. Josephine didn't just run off. I know she didn't. I've been to every town from here to Santa Fe, and nobody's seen her. Nobody. The sheriff descended the steps slowly, deliberately. The crowd that had gathered, shopkeepers, ranch hands, the church ladies who'd always looked down on the Whitmore sisters since their mother died, pressed closer, sensing drama. Clara felt their judgment like the afternoon sun beating down on her shoulders. We've been through this, Sheriff Garrett said, his tone patient but firm, the way you'd speak to a child insisting on a fairy tale. Josephine left of her own accord. She was of age. Women have the right to go where they please. She wouldn't leave without telling me. Clara pulled a crumpled letter from her coat pocket, her hands trembling. The last letter I got from her, she said something was wrong. She said she'd found out something about. About what, Miss Whitmore? The sheriff's hand moved to rest on his gun belt, a casual gesture that everyone noticed. What exactly did your sister claim to discover? Clara's mouth went dry. The letter had been vague, frightened. I've seen something I shouldn't have. If anything happens to me, Clara, don't trust. The letter had ended there, the ink smeared as if Josephine had been interrupted. Or frightened into stopping. She said there was corruption, Clara managed. Land deals. Money changing hands that shouldn't. The sheriff's laugh was sharp enough to cut. And you believe that? Clara, your sister was always prone to dramatics. She probably ran off with some traveling salesman and was too embarrassed to tell you. He looked around at the crowd, including them in his reasonable assessment. It happens. Young women get foolish notions. The murmurs of agreement rippled through the onlookers. Clara felt her cheeks burn, not from sun but from shame and rage. Mrs. Henderson from the general store shook her head sympathetically. Poor dear's been rode hard by grief, she whispered, not quietly enough. The Whitmore girls never did learn their place after their mama passed. Clara wanted to scream, to grab the sheriff by his vest and demand he tell her what he knew. Because his eyes told a different story than his words. They were cold, calculating, and beneath his patient exterior, she sensed threat. But she had no proof. Only a sister's intuition and a half-finished letter that could mean anything or nothing. The silence stretched out, broken only by the creak of the general store's sign swinging in the breeze and the distant sound of cattle lowing. Clara stood alone in the center of the street, every eye upon her, her desperation exposed for all to judge. Go home, Miss Whitmore, the sheriff said finally, his voice almost gentle. Grieve properly. Accept what is. Redemption has no place for wild accusations and women riding around like outlaws. He turned his back on her, a dismissal more final than words, and walked into the jailhouse. The door closed with a solid thud that sounded like a vault ceiling. Clara stood frozen, her mare's reins slack in her hands, utterly alone in a crowd of familiar faces that had become strangers. The Copper Star Saloon wasn't the kind of place respectable women entered, but Clara had exhausted respectability somewhere between Socorro and here. She pushed through the doors as the sun set, painting the sky the color of dried blood, and felt the weight of male attention settle on her like a heavy coat. Well. The bartender, a gap-toothed man named Silas, grinned at her. The prodigal daughter returns and heads straight for sin. Your mom'd be scandalized. My mama's dead, Silas. Pour me a whiskey. The conversations around her had stuttered to silence, but slowly resumed with an undercurrent of speculation. Clara took her drink to a corner table, her back to the wall, a habit she'd picked up on the trail, and tried to think. 3 months of searching had taught her things she'd never wanted to know about the territories: how many ways a woman could disappear, how little anyone cared about finding her, how easily men lied when it served them. She'd learned to read tracks, to ask the right questions in the right ways, to recognize when someone was hiding something. And Sheriff Daniel Garrett was hiding something. "You're causing quite a stir." Clara looked up to find the last person she'd expected, Eliza Chen, the town's laundress, standing beside her table with 2 plates of stew. The Chinese woman was small, barely 5 feet tall, with strong hands and a quiet presence most people overlooked entirely. She'd done the Whitmore family's washing for years, accepting payment in eggs and vegetables when money was tight, never commenting on the sisters' shabby dresses or their father's drinking. "May I sit?" Clara nodded, surprised. Eliza set down both plates and took the opposite chair, her movements economical and graceful. "You shouldn't be seen with me," Clara said. "The whole town thinks I'm mad. The whole town thinks I'm invisible." Eliza's English was crisp, carefully enunciated. She'd told Josephine once that she'd learned from missionary teachers in San Francisco. Sometimes that has advantages. She pushed one plate toward Clara. "You need to eat. You look like you've been living on jerky and creek water." The kindness made Clara's throat tight. She picked up the spoon with hands that shook slightly, and the first bite of hot food made her want to cry. She hadn't realized how hungry she was, how worn down. Eliza ate her own meal calmly, unbothered by the stares from other patrons. Finally she spoke, her voice low enough that only Clara could hear. "Your sister didn't leave town." Clara's spoon clattered against the plate. "What?" "I do laundry for most of the town. I see things. Hear things through open windows." Eliza's dark eyes were sharp, intelligent. 3 months ago, Josephine came to my shop after dark. She was frightened. She said she'd overheard the sheriff and Mr. Blackwood talking about falsified land claims, Mexican families being driven off property that was legally theirs so it could be resold to Eastern investors. She'd seen papers, dates, forgeries. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Who would listen to a Chinese laundress?" Eliza's smile was bitter. "Besides, Josephine made me promise not to. She said she needed proof before she could accuse the sheriff. She was going to break into his office that night. And then she disappeared. The next morning, the sheriff announced she'd run off. Her room at the boarding house was cleared out, all her things gone, as if she'd packed carefully and left. But I knew better." Eliza leaned forward. "Josephine left a dress at my shop for mending. She never came to collect it. Your sister wouldn't have left town without her Sunday best." Clara's heart hammered. "Where is she?" "I don't know. But I know she's alive." "How?" Eliza glanced around, then reached into her apron pocket and withdrew a small, folded handkerchief. She pressed it into Clara's hand beneath the table. "Every week, I find one of these tucked into my laundry deliveries to the jailhouse. Always the same corner torn, the same small knot tied in the lace. It's a signal. Your sister and I used to do the same thing as girls in San Francisco, a way to pass messages without words." Clara unfolded the handkerchief. The corner was indeed torn, and a tiny, deliberate knot marked the lace edging. Her sister had touched this. "Recently. She's in the jail?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "No, I've looked. There's no prisoner registered, and I collect laundry from every cell." Eliza's expression was troubled. "But she's somewhere the sheriff controls. Somewhere she has access to clean linens that come through my shop." "The sheriff's house." "It's possible. But proving it." Eliza shook her head. "He's careful, powerful. And you already made a scene today. He'll be watching you." Clara's mind raced. "But he won't be watching you." "No," Eliza agreed quietly. "He won't." The plan came together in whispers over the next 3 days. Clara played her part publicly, the defeated sister, packing to leave town, apologizing to the sheriff for her wild accusations, in front of witnesses at the general store. She saw the satisfaction in Daniel Garrett's eyes, the way he relaxed his vigilance. Meanwhile, Eliza moved through town like always, invisible, carrying her baskets of clean laundry, delivering to the sheriff's house every Tuesday at noon when he was always at the land office. The signal came on Thursday, a red ribbon tied to Eliza's shop door, visible from the street but meaningless to anyone who didn't know to look for it. Clara met her after dark behind the livery stable, where the smell of horses and hay covered the sound of urgent voices. "She's there," Eliza said without preamble. "In the root cellar beneath his house. There's a new lock on the door and I heard." She paused, her composure cracking. "I heard someone crying. Quietly, like they were trying not to be heard." The rage that flooded Clara was white-hot and clarifying. "We get her out tonight. The sheriff hosts poker every Thursday. He'll have 4 men with him, the mayor, Mr. Blackwood, the banker, and Deputy Morrison. All the men involved in the land scheme, I'd wager." "Perfect." Clara's smile was feral. "They'll be drunk and distracted. We go at midnight." "And then what?" Eliza's practicality hadn't deserted her. "Even if we free Josephine, they'll come after us. The sheriff will claim she stole something, or that we're the criminals. We need more than her freedom, we need proof of what he's done." She was right. Clara knew she was right. The papers. Josephine said she saw papers. If they still exist, they're in his office. In the jailhouse. They looked at each other in the darkness, understanding passing between them. It was an impossible task: break into the sheriff's house, free Josephine, then break into the jailhouse and steal evidence, all while the sheriff and his co-conspirators were in town. "We'll need help," Clara said. "I know someone." Eliza's voice was careful. "But you won't like it." The man's name was Ben Whitehorse, and he was Cheyenne, living on the outskirts of town in a cabin the respectable citizens pretended didn't exist. He was tall, lean, with long dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He'd guided Clara on part of her search months ago, teaching her to read trail signs and recognize when she was being lied to. He listened to their plan without interruption, then said simply, "When?" "Tonight. Midnight." Ben looked at the 2 women, one sunburned and desperate, the other small and determined, and nodded. "The sheriff's been stealing Indian land too. Forging deeds, bribing surveyors. My people have been trying to prove it for 2 years." He stood. "I'll get my tools." Midnight in Redemption was quiet except for the laughter from the sheriff's house, where lantern lights spilled through windows and cigar smoke drifted into the night. Clara crouched beside the root cellar door with Ben while Eliza kept watch from the shadows. The lock was new, solid. Ben worked at it with picks he'd made himself, his hands steady despite the risk. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, something clicked. The door swung open on hinges that shrieked. They all froze, but the poker game continued inside, someone dealing cards with a snap. The cellar was dark and smelled of earth and fear. Clara descended the wooden steps, her heart in her throat. "Josie!" A gasp. Movement in the darkness. Then her sister's voice, hoarse and disbelieving. "Clara!" They found each other in the dark, arms wrapping tight, and Clara felt Josephine shaking, or maybe that was her own trembling. Her sister was thin, too thin, and her dress was torn. "I knew you'd come," Josephine whispered. "I knew you wouldn't believe I'd run. But Clara, you shouldn't have. He'll kill us all now. Not if we kill his reputation first. Where are the papers?" "He took them. That first night, he caught me in his office and he took everything. Said he'd make me watch while he destroyed my family if I didn't stay quiet." Clara's jaw clenched. "Then we get new proof. Tonight." They emerged from the cellar to find Ben helping Eliza lower a ladder against the house. "What are you doing?" "The poker game," Eliza said calmly, though her hands betrayed her tension. "They're all drunk, all talking. If someone could listen from the roof, above the window." It was insane. It was brilliant. "I'll do it," Clara said. "No." Ben was already climbing. "I'm quieter. And if I'm caught, I'm already a criminal in their eyes. You 3 need to stay witnesses they'll have to believe." He disappeared onto the roof like smoke, and they waited in an agony of suspense. 5 minutes. Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Then Ben was back, dropping silently beside them, and his eyes were fierce with triumph. "I heard everything. Names, dates, months. Blackwood bragging about how much he's made. The sheriff talking about taking care of a Mexican family next week. He pulled out a small notebook. I wrote it all down. That's not proof, Josephine said weakly. It's hearsay. No, Eliza said slowly. But it's enough to make certain people ask questions. My cousin works for the territorial governor's office. If we can get this to him. We ride tonight, Clara decided. All of us. We get Josephine somewhere safe, then we make noise so loud they can't silence it. They were turning to leave when the front door opened. Sheriff Daniel Garrett stood backlit in the doorway, his gun already drawn. Behind him, the other men were scrambling for their own weapons. Well, the sheriff said, his voice cold as winter. This is disappointing, Clara. I'd hoped you were smarter than your sister. The town square at dawn was the last place Clara had expected to see the sun rise. But here she was, hands bound, kneeling in the dirt alongside Josephine, Eliza, and Ben, while Sheriff Garrett paced before them like a preacher before his congregation. The whole town had been roused. His deputies had gone door to door, claiming there'd been an attempted robbery and assault. Now Redemption citizens stood in a ragged semicircle, some in nightclothes, all confused and frightened. I'm sorry to wake you all, the sheriff announced, his voice carrying across the square with practiced authority. But you need to see how far some people will go when they're consumed by delusions and greed. He gestured to Clara and her companions. Miss Whitmore here has been making wild accusations against me for days. Tonight, she broke into my home with these accomplices, a laundryman, and a known Indian agitator, and attempted to rob me. When I confronted them, they attacked. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara saw doubt on some faces, belief on others. Mrs. Henderson looked sympathetic but resigned. Mr. Patterson from the feed store was already nodding along. That's a lie, Clara said loudly. We broke in to free my sister. Your sister ran away months ago, the sheriff interrupted smoothly. Everyone knows that. Then explain why she was locked in your root cellar. The crowd stirred. That was specific enough to be troubling. Sheriff Garrett's expression hardened. I found this woman hiding on my property tonight. She claimed to be Josephine Whitmore, but given that Miss Whitmore left town months ago and this woman appeared exactly when Clara made her wild accusations, I believe she's an accomplice, possibly paid to impersonate her sister. It was masterful. Clara saw the way he turned it around, making Josephine's presence evidence of conspiracy rather than his crime. Look at her face. Clara shouted. She's my sister, everyone here knew her. But Josephine was gaunt, her hair dirty, her clothes torn. In the gray dawn light she looked like a stranger. I am Josephine Whitmore, her sister said, her voice stronger than Clara had heard it in days. I've lived in Redemption my whole life. Mrs. Henderson, you sold me blue ribbon for my Sunday bonnet last April. Mr. Patterson, I helped you sort your ledgers when your wife was ill. Miss Sarah, she looked at the schoolteacher, I borrowed your copy of Jane Eyre and returned it with a thank you pie. Recognition flickered across faces. The certainty in the crowd began to crack. Sheriff Garrett saw it too. His hand moved toward his gun. That proves nothing, he said. A good con artist learns details. Show them your shoulder, Eliza said suddenly. Josephine, show them the birthmark. Clara remembered, a port wine stain on Josephine's left shoulder, shaped like a bird in flight. Their mother had called it an angel's touch. Josephine stood shakily and pulled aside her torn dress, revealing the distinctive mark. The crowd's murmur became a roar. Half the women there had seen that birthmark at church socials, at barn dances, in the modest bathing area at the creek. It's her, someone said. My God, it's really her. Sheriff Garrett's face went dark. So she came back. That doesn't prove. It proves you lied, Clara said, standing despite her bound hands. It proves you've been holding her captive for 3 months. Why, Sheriff? What was she going to expose? She's insane, the sheriff snapped. She broke into the land office, stole papers, made wild claims about corruption. What papers? Ben's voice was quiet but sharp. If she stole them, where are they now? I recovered them. Then show us, the schoolteacher called. Show us these papers she supposedly stole. The sheriff's jaw worked. They're evidence in an ongoing investigation. There's no investigation registered, Deputy Morrison said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at him. The young deputy looked sick but determined. I check the logs every day, Sheriff. There's been no investigation, no stolen papers reported, no prisoner registered. And I've been wondering why you've been buying extra food supplies, ordering double portions of meals to be delivered to your house. The silence was absolute. I saw a woman's handkerchief in the laundry from your house, Eliza added, her voice carrying despite her small stature. Every week. The same signal Josephine and I used as girls. I knew she was alive. I knew she was sending messages. The crowd pressed closer, their mood shifting from confusion to anger. These were decent people, hard-working people, and they were beginning to understand they'd been deceived. Sheriff Garrett drew his gun. Back away, he ordered. All of you. This is still my town. No, sir. Deputy Morrison drew his own weapon, pointing it at the sheriff. His hand trembled, but his voice was steady. It's not. You've betrayed your badge in this town. I'm placing you under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. For a moment, Clara thought the sheriff would fight. His finger was on the trigger, his eyes wild. But he was surrounded now, and even his co-conspirators, Blackwood, the mayor, the banker, were backing away, trying to distance themselves from the sinking ship. The gun lowered. Morrison moved forward and took it, then pulled out handcuffs. As the sheriff was led away, Josephine collapsed into Clara's arms, both sisters sinking to the ground in exhaustion and relief. The territorial marshal arrived 3 days later, summoned by Deputy Morrison's telegram. The investigation that followed was swift and brutal. The falsified land deeds were found in the sheriff's office safe, along with ledgers detailing bribes and payoffs. Blackwood turned witness in exchange for reduced charges, providing testimony that implicated the mayor and banker. But it was Josephine's account, given in the land office with the whole town present, that Clara would remember most. Her sister sat in a chair that seemed too large for her diminished frame, her voice sometimes faltering but never stopping, describing 3 months of captivity in a root cellar. How the sheriff had caught her stealing the documents, had hit her when she tried to run, had locked her underground and told the town she'd fled. How he'd visited her daily, sometimes to bring food, sometimes to threaten what he'd do to Clara if Josephine ever tried to escape or call for help. I left signals in the laundry, Josephine said, looking at Eliza with gratitude. I didn't know if anyone would understand, but I had to try. Clara sat beside her sister, holding her hand, and watched their small community grapple with its shame. These were people who'd dismissed Clara's concerns, who'd accepted the sheriff's lies because it was easier than believing their own elected official was corrupt. Some couldn't meet her eyes. Others apologized, awkward and sincere. Mrs. Henderson brought food. The schoolteacher offered her spare room. Mr. Patterson refunded every cent the Whitmore sisters had spent in his store over the years, insisting they'd need it more than him. It wasn't enough to undo what had happened, but it was something. The evening after the marshal took custody of the sheriff and his accomplices, Clara found Eliza at her laundry shop, working by lamplight despite the hour. You should rest, Clara said from the doorway. Eliza looked up, her hands stilling in the wash water. So should you? You've barely slept in days. Clara stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The shop smelled of lye soap and clean cotton, homely and safe. I came to thank you. Without you, I'd never have known Josephine was still alive. I'd have given up. You wouldn't have. Eliza's certainty was absolute. You rode for 3 months searching. You're not someone who gives up. I am when it comes to knowing who to trust. Clara moved closer. I rode past your shop a dozen times when I first got back. I never thought to talk to you, never thought you'd have answers. I'm ashamed of that. Most people don't see me, Eliza said simply. I'm used to it. Well, I see you now. Clara held her gaze. You saved my sister's life. You risked everything, your business, your safety, for us. Why? Eliza returned to her washing, but her movements were slower, more thoughtful. My family came to San Francisco when I was 8. My father worked on the railroad, died in a tunnel collapse when I was 12. My mother took in washing to feed us. When she got sick, no one would help. Chinese weren't welcome in hospitals, weren't worth a white doctor's time. She died in our room above a laundry shop, and I was alone. She wrung out a shirt with strong, practiced hands. Your mother gave me work when I came to redemption. Didn't care what anyone thought. She paid fair, treated me with respect. When she died, Josephine kept bringing me your family's laundry, kept paying even when I knew you couldn't afford it. She'd stay and talk, ask about my day, treat me like a person. Eliza looked up. Your sister was kind when she didn't have to be. How could I do less for her? Clara's throat was tight. You're extraordinary. No. I'm just someone who pays her debts and tries to do right. But color had risen in Eliza's cheeks, and she couldn't quite hide her pleasure at the compliment. They worked together in comfortable silence after that, Clara helping with the sorting despite Eliza's protests that she was a customer, not an employee. It felt good to be useful, to do simple work with her hands while her mind settled. Finally, as the moon rose outside, Clara spoke the question she'd been carrying. What will you do now? Keep washing clothes, I suppose? Eliza's smile was slight. It's honest work and I'm good at it. You're good at a lot of things. Investigation. Planning. Noticing what others miss. Clara hesitated. The town's going to need a new sheriff eventually. Eliza laughed, the sound startled and genuine. They'd never. Probably not, Clara admitted. But they should. You're smarter and braver than any lawman I've met. She took a breath. Josephine and I are going to rebuild our ranch. It's barely surviving and we don't know the first thing about running it properly. We could use a partner. Someone smart, capable, who doesn't mind hard work. Eliza's hand stilled. Clara. I'm not asking out of pity or debt. I'm asking because I want you there. Because I think we'd make a good team, you, me, and Josephine. Because. She forced herself to meet Eliza's eyes. Because I'm tired of people like us being invisible or dismissed. I want to build something that proves we matter. The silence stretched. Then Eliza smiled, slow and wondering. I've never owned anything before. Never had a place that was truly mine. Then let's build one together. The Whitmore ranch had seen better days. The house needed a new roof, half the fences were down, and the barn leaned at an alarming angle. But as Clara surveyed the property with Josephine and Eliza beside her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months, hope. It's a lot of work, Josephine said doubtfully. She was recovering slowly, eating regular meals, sleeping in a real bed instead of on a cellar floor. But nightmares still woke her, and loud noises made her flinch. Then it's good there's 3 of us, Eliza said practically. She'd sold her laundry business to the widow Thompson for a fair price and moved her few belongings to the ranch. Now she stood with a notebook, already making lists. We'll need lumber for the roof. New fence posts. I can handle the books and planning if you 2 manage the livestock. I don't know anything about livestock, Clara admitted. Neither do I, Eliza said. But I can read and the land office has manuals. We'll learn. They learned. Over the following months, the 3 women became a fixture in redemption, riding into town for supplies, haggling at the general store, consulting with ranchers who were willing to give advice. And there were more than Clara had expected. Word of what they'd done had spread, and some men seemed genuinely impressed. Ben Whitehorse visited often, teaching them about reading weather signs and understanding the land. The territorial governor, grateful for the evidence that brought down a corruption ring, granted him and his tribe back some of the stolen land, and his people began rebuilding nearby. It wasn't easy. There were ranchers who refused to work with those women, townspeople who whispered about the unnatural household. But there were also supporters, Mrs. Henderson, who extended them credit, Deputy Morrison, now sheriff, who made sure troublemakers left them alone, the schoolteacher, who brought books and stayed for dinner. Slowly, impossibly, the ranch began to thrive. Eliza's organizational genius transformed their chaos into efficiency. She negotiated better prices for their cattle, found markets for their wool, even convinced the railroad to add a stop near their property. Josephine, fragile at first, grew stronger, her gift for animals becoming clear as she gentled their horses and nursed sick calves back to health. And Clara discovered she had her mother's stubborn determination, working dawn to dusk, learning to mend fences and deliver foals and keep going when everything hurt. They complemented each other, filled in each other's gaps. When Josephine had nightmares, Clara sat with her. When Clara pushed herself too hard, Eliza made her rest. When Eliza struggled with townspeople who wouldn't take her seriously, Josephine's gentle charms smoothed the way. One evening, 6 months after that midnight rescue, they sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The new roof was complete, the fences repaired, and they just sold their first cattle at a profit. "I never thanked you," Josephine said quietly. "Either of you. You risked everything for me." "You'd have done the same," Clara said. "I would. But that doesn't make what you did less extraordinary." Josephine took both their hands. "I have something I want to say, and I need you to listen without interrupting." They waited. "This ranch, this life, I don't want to share it as partners. I want to share it as family. Legal, binding family." She pulled out a document from her pocket. "I went to the lawyer in town. He drew up papers making us equal owners, not just partners but something more. Sisters-in-law, if not in blood." Eliza's eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. "Josephine, let me finish. The three of us, we've built something here. Something that matters. I want it protected. I want it official. I want the whole world to know that we belong to each other, that this land is ours together, that no one can separate us or claim we're less than we are." She looked between them. "Will you sign?" Clara took the document with shaking hands. It was more than a business arrangement. It was a declaration. 3 women, bound by choice and mutual respect, creating their own definition of family. "Yes," she said. "God, yes." Eliza nodded, unable to speak, and they signed together as the sun set, marking the paper with their names, making official what their hearts already knew. The Whitmore Ranch was known throughout the territory. 3 women running a successful operation wasn't common, but it wasn't unheard of anymore either. They'd proven it could be done, and other women had followed their example. Sheriff Morrison stopped by regularly, often with news of the wider world. The men who'd conspired with Sheriff Garrett had all faced justice, some imprisoned, others ruined by fines and disgrace. The land stolen from Mexican families and Indian tribes had been returned, though the process was slow and painful. Ben Whitehorse had married and had 2 children who ran wild across the shared property line between his land and theirs. Josephine taught them to ride while Eliza taught them numbers and Clara taught them to rope. The nightmares came less frequently now. Josephine had scars, they all did, but they'd learned to carry them, to talk about them in the quiet evenings when work was done and they sat together on the porch they'd rebuilt with their own hands. Visitors sometimes asked how they made it work, 3 women with different backgrounds and skills. Clara always smiled at the question. "We see each other," she'd say simply. "We pay attention. We value what each person brings. It's not complicated." But it was more than that, and she knew it. It was choosing, every day, to build something together. It was trusting that when you stumbled, someone would catch you. It was knowing you were seen, valued, essential, not despite your differences, but because of them. On a clear summer evening, Clara stood at the fence line and looked across their land. Josephine was in the south pasture with the horses, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Eliza was at the house, probably doing accounts by lamplight, meticulous as always. Their land, their life, their choice. It wasn't the story Clara had imagined when she rode back to Redemption that dusty afternoon, desperate and alone. It was better, stranger, more real. It was home. And every day it was enough.